Hi, everyone. I'm Bernadette. Welcome to the show. I want to remind you to like, subscribe, and share. The super chat is also open. Tonight, my guest is Mr. Barry Littleton. Barry is an alien contactee. He is a paranormal experiencer. He has had a near death experience, and he has also done work with crossing over earthbound spirits as well as relieving people of spiritual attachments. Let's welcome Barry to the show. Hi, Barry.
Hello, how you doing? I appreciate you having me on.
Hi.
It's a real
Oh,
pleasure. So
thank you so
thank you.
much for being here. So, for those who don't know you, let's get to know you. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm what I think is actually a great deal more common than what society has allowed us to know. I've been a contactee, and I was kind of born awake to a degree with past life memories and things that you can't quite associate, especially as you grow up with the school system and the stuff that we learn about history and all that. But it started off, waking up in like on board these crafts sometimes, or in a room where I'm doing something, working with my mind. And it was like they call it, I found some contactees call it the mystery school and things like that. So that's what I had went through, a lot of that. And also encountering a being that was an insectoid when I was a kid also, and he come around and played with me a few times. But I think it says a lot because when he would play with me, he appeared to be a normal person. I think it says a lot. But I was supervised always, so he was seen by others and other kids. He appeared to be a kid like me. So it says a lot what these beings, I think, can do through their optical nerves. What they can present to us consciously. It's a whole nother thing going on there. So that is, I think, actually quite common, probably with a lot of your audience here. They experience stuff like that when they're a child, and when as you grow up, it starts kind of either fading away or changing. I call those childhood experiences, and that went on to what I call adult onset experiences that started when I was about 18. And it was somebody else with me on three of those that involved seeing some of these ships and missing time. And you see like technology, you see some of these beings, non-human sometimes. And then when you get away from the event horizon, it starts becoming fragmented, and that's why you have to do things like deep meditation, hypnosis things, even if you're a conscious experiencer, physically, like I was. So I would say a lot of times, oh,
Right.
I'm not like Travis Walton or Barney Hill and them. They all got their minds wiped. But the truth is, what I could remember for a physical contact that involved missing time, each of the experiences that I'm describing that started when I was adult onset experiences involved 4.5 hours of missing time each one. So I wind up missing 20 hours of missing time. Three of these times, somebody else was with me. So when you see these craft come up in something, you're in some sort of communication with them, and then obviously you have this experience, and you're missing all this time that you can't fully account for. I mean, that type of delusion is not shared, thankfully. so,
No, right.
so,
And do
but
you think you also have, oh, sorry.
oh no, I was going to say, but coming along with this, that I want to say that some of this, like being quote unquote a contactee or experiencer, is not the separate things that I think the media and society makes it. A lot of us that have these type of things happen to us also have encounters with non-humans, as in ghosts, earthbound spirits that are trapped here, and other things that are entities that that inhabit the earth and walk here with us in different dimensions and astral form and things like that. A lot of us have that happen, and some of us can even be a beacon when we're children. Like when I was 7, all sorts of stuff started happening to me, and I got attacked by an earthbound spirit. And we have to be aware that some of the things that hold people here from crossing over, you have some people so full of hate or whatever demonic type of thing is in them, they cross over, they don't cross over, and they turn into something worse. So I was in a house and I got attacked by an earthbound spirit. And since I know now, being older, it was trying to join with me. But since it couldn't, I was protected and I knew how to do that. But what it's doing is telling me, get out, get out. And it felt like a bear hug. And what an earthbound will do is seek out somebody who's a child like that can see, that can communicate with them. And it's like a beacon to them. Okay. And they'll try to scare them or join with them to definitely stop them from using their abilities. So be aware of that. I'm feeling there's a couple of people listening to us now that have been attacked by earthbound spirits when they were kids. Yeah, it can be traumatizing, especially if you're sleeping and they come and put that sleep paralysis on you or something like that. So
Yeah, I was very interested because I've heard you speak about, earthbound spirits before and attachments on other shows, and I was very interested in that topic. So if you want to speak more about that, so you're, from what I've heard you say, that they're all around us, that they're basically every day, and what perked my interest is that I've actually seen, people who are not alive, and if you've made eye contact with them, they make eye contact with you, and it's like you can see me, and then they're right up on you. So it's best if you just I don't see you, you're not here, I don't see you. So that very piqued my interest, because I'm like, somebody else has seen that too,
yeah, see, see, that's interesting. See, you're a medium, a natural medium, and that's really cool because we have, every medium is a psychic, but every psychic is not a medium. They're different gifts, definitely. But when seeing that and when dealing with these earthbound spirits, there's two types, and one is the one that, like you're talking about, that is attached to the outside of a person's energy field, or kind of following a person in that way, but they're on the outside for the most part. And if I'm going to communicate, with this earthbound spirit, it'll normally give me some type of survival evidence, because it's attached to that person for a reason, and it wants to deliver a message. So that's something that's, definite. Now there's these others that are earthbound spirits that are so entwined into people's energy field that they're not detectable, and they express themselves as negative behavior patterns, normally the ones that kept them trapped here. So it can be addiction, hatred, even love of a loved one, a person, all sorts of things, that with property, that keeps people trapped here. And it's much easier than we think. And the more of these earthbound spirits I've worked with, I'm a little bit shocked how easy it is. And I always look for, forgive me, everyone listening, but I always look for references in entertainment. I've got one of those minds. I see a line from, or a scene from any movie, whatever, I remember all of them, So used to be a curse when I was a kid, because heck, HBO showed the same damn movies every every couple of days. There's nothing to be seen again. But anyway, I always look for references of frames of reference within entertainment, and one I think is the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. Before he actually passed, when he chases after the brother in the alley and the gun goes off, he's chasing him. He goes back and he starts seeing his body. And then when he sees that, he's shocked, because she's telling him to breathe and stuff. And what's going on? He starts going through what we would call a panoramic life review. It's starting to flash in front of his eyes. He's seeing something he had just done. Then he starts seeing the lights coming down. He's going, "What is this?" And then then he looks back at his body, looks at the light. He says, "No, no," and he starts running towards his body. And it stayed on for a second, and then it went out. I can't tell you how many earthbound spirits that have communicated that to me, and something quite similar. And it says a lot about our free will. And people say that we don't have really. Yeah, how far does that go? As being parts of the creator, the creative principle passes through us on the soul level. We do have a free will, and we're strong enough to deny that light. Okay. And they'll tell me that, sometimes it's the sheer shock of the death that makes them run for the light, or they feel that they got cheated. Or I've come across this quite a bit too. I'm not going in that light. Why? Well, because I really hurt a lot of people, and I think I'm going to burn in there. I think it's hell. Very powerful auto-suggestion there. Heaven and hell, very powerful.
Right. And that makes that, you bring a good point when you said that some spirits, have a message to tell, and when they get a hold of a person, they try to direct them to tell the message. My very first experience was when I was about 5, around 4 or 5. I was running through the house, how kids are, and I was stopped. Somebody had just put their hand on my chest and stopped me. It was like, "You have to go to the window and watch this." And I went to the window, and I watched the neighbor across the street commit suicide. And the more when I originally happened, and when I remembered it years later and everything, I thought it was the old lady who had passed away in the house, who protected the house, basically. She wanted me to see it. But the more I think about it, I'm wondering if it wasn't him. Like, you have to watch me do this, so somebody knows, and of course, when I told my mom, she kind of looked at me and she's like, and she looked at my grandmother and she's like, what are you letting her watch? Like, are you letting her watch soap? What are you watching? And then the sirens started and there was screaming, and my mom's like, we'll just keep her in the house, or just, I'm going to go outside. And when she came back in, there was a lot of whispering, and so it makes, that makes me wonder.
Wow, that's a powerful statement you just had there.
Yeah.
When I've encountered suicides, a lot of times they at least the ones that are outside the energy field, they tend to step back or go back, and they won't give me that survival evidence. There's normally an immense amount of normally shame and embarrassment you feel with it also. And I think that's an account of, because when they commit this act, they didn't realize how hard it hurts everyone around them that does love them, and it comes back like a millionfold. When I died, I had a near-death experience myself. I had a bad car accident in 2010, and had a coma, and then after that, just a long story. Anyway, I died on the way to the hospital, and I encountered loved ones. And during the time I was in the coma, or I thought it was then, but apparently right after the accident happened, I encountered loved ones. And when I came back, when I'd survived, I actually took 4 catastrophic traumatic brain injuries. And this was hematoma to the frontal lobe, hematoma to the quarter lobe, hematoma to the brain stem, and also something called diffusal axonal, which is like a shaken baby syndrome, where your head turns in the case, and the spotting of the brain, blood spots. And actually, my brain turned back in the case, and I was blessed, and I survived. So 95% of people that have DFA never regain consciousness. So anyway, the near-death experience definitely changed my life. I thought I was a little spiritual before, and I lived by the golden rule. When I come home from school in elementary, G.I. Joe and all them were talking about the golden rule. I try to live by that,
Right.
But nonetheless, even with that, and having studied the death process and trying to learn about it, when I actually went through it, a lot of people say, "What'd you see, this and that?" As opposed to saying, because it's not the cool Hollywood stuff a lot of people have talked about. What I will say this is definitely that I underestimated the impact that our relationships have on each other, period. It's much more than you think. So I would say, if you can every day, try to put a smile on one person's face. Try to do something like that. It means a lot. You know what I mean? It's not that hard. And the vibration is planted. It's anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm going off what we're talking about. But back to
you're fine.
The earthbound thing. The earthbound spirits that are inside the energy field, they're really deep, and they express themselves in these negative behavior patterns like what you just described. And it can be things like that. They join with somebody and they start forcing them to do a suicide, And I want to throw this out too. When I find out, I always am curious where these earthbound join with the people at, the clients. And the amount of times I've gotten not just hospitals, but incubator rooms is most disconcerting, okay?
Yeah.
And we, especially I think here in the United States, don't particularly practice not just the probably appropriate death rituals, but also protecting our children energetically, putting a womb and a cocoon over them when they're born, especially in their incubator rooms, to the point of where I had a client, this about a year ago now, and they knew how to protect themselves. All right. So sometimes what will happen during a surgery or something, you're in there, the earthbound will try to join with you because it's trying to help you. It thinks, and this earthbound is telling me, well, I didn't join with I joined with this person, and I was the only one strong enough in the room to do it, and kept making reference to others. So before I crossed them over, I asked, how many other are in this hospital room? I said, somewhere between about 34 and 50. And that just made you go, whoa. When you think about something like that, that's really, really quite traumatizing. And I've seen people have as many 10 or more earthbounds attached to them. And sadly, a lot of people will get a little bit weirded out after the session is done, because this happens especially in the person, I take them real deep hypnosis. And that's actually when these things will show themselves. Otherwise, they're not really distinguishable. And that's period. I've been doing it for a minute now. It's just the way it is. And it's disconcerting to a degree to know there are that many earthbound spirits walking around down here. And I promise you, from what I've seen, their population, I think, is a bit more numerous than the living. It's very serious down here. And there's layers of things. So what we're talking about here, Bernadette, is not the demonic. I'm not going with that. I'm seeing somebody putting up their attachments, this, attachments, that. We could say a lot of things like that. But here we're talking about not the demonic. We're talking about earthbound spirits. There's these layers. And that's like mom and dad, grandpa, grandma didn't cross over. And like saying, they're probably, and a lot of times, what do they say to you? In a haunted house, the spirits will say, the ghosts will say, well, I wanted them out of here. They're changing everything. I put my whole life into this place. And so they can't cross over because of that. Or when we say to a loved one, oh, please don't go. Please don't. And, they're hearing that and they don't. They join with us to not leave. We're strong enough to keep them and hold them back instead of saying go into the light. And I'm going to throw one last thing at, because I know where you're going to go with this. I know I've heard this whole thing amongst the New Age communities and the UFO communities. Don't go into the light when you die. It's a reincarnation cycle. It's a trap. Well, learn something about that first, all right? When you're out of the body, when you're dying, at first, it's like, from what I can tell, it's like when you've been sleeping for 10 hours, you're really in REM, you hit that alarm, and when you wake up, you're kind of just foggy for a second, and then you get on with your day. You make your coffee, whatever. The death process can be like that, especially that shock that comes with it when you come out of the body. It's when you realize this, it's a big shock. Okay. So anyway, telling people not to go into the light. And when that light goes out and at the point of death, use your discernment. Okay. When you come out of that fog real quick, because it's when you're in that little fog I just described that you have others that can come and try to present some type of a soul trap or some type of a trick. Well, use your discernment. Like when I died, I know it was my loved ones I encountered. It felt like them, period. My uncle had just died. We just buried him a day before I had that accident. And he was there and he's talking to me and I'm communicating with him like I'm talking to you. It wasn't like some vision, and my grandmother standing behind him and her best friend. And she never talked though. She's kind of blinking like an owl, and he was giving me some information, but the point being that it wasn't like some big false. And I've seen through portals loved ones come and get the people to cross over that are earthbound. They can't, a lot of times they can't, these beings are already there. The portal's already there. I'm seeing it before the session even starts. And then when they're deep under, almost delta, deep theta, they see it too. But the earthbound can't see it until they start focusing on love. And you start talking to them about love. Then they start seeing this light. It's connected. So whoever it is that's telling you, oh, don't go in the light. We remote viewed it. We did this and that. Okay, first of all, are they a medium themselves? Secondly, have they had a near-death experience? Have they crossed over a bit and come back? 3, have they worked with a population of earthbound spirits? If they have, let's hear about it. Tell me all about it. How many of these? How come I've dealt with over almost 300 now, and they all say the same thing? It's dark here. It's dark here. I'm hearing people in these communities tell people, oh, don't go to the first light. Don't go to the first light. Wait for another one, or go to the darkness. What? You don't go to the darkness. That's not what's happening there. When I died, I encountered these angelics before I could remember who I was. And for reference, I took my TBIs when I was 36. I had experiences long before that. That has nothing to do with my experience as a child, certainly. So I'm not going to be discredited because I had brain injuries. I'm not cognitively cognizant. But anyway, point being, even before I remembered who I was, when I woke up, I'd seen these angelics in my mind's eye. And when I say that, they weren't people. These were like corpuscles of light, hundreds of them, bright, all right, with these things around them. I like Star Trek. It looked like shields to me, kind of. Okay, and I can't tell you enough, Bernadette, the love I felt coming off them I think a little bit more would have maybe burned me up, burned out my chakras. We don't think about that type of intense love hurting like that. Not like that. And it's pure creative love. I think they're so close to the creator. So when I remembered who I was, get all this, like my mama said before she died, she's like, when you first woke up, they said you were conscious, but your eyes would roll in your head once a day. And then when you start talking about these angels, purple angel and this and that. And her brother just had died, So anyway, this point being, these beings, they were regal, and the amount of love I felt off them, I had to really take and compare to what I had experienced with some of these interdimensionals or extraterrestrials, wherever they are, both on some of these craft that are non-corporeal, non-humans, non-physical, all the way around. They're different containers for consciousness. You've got plasma, you've got bent light, you've got crystal, you've got several different configures for consciousness beyond the humanity atom cadmon frame. Sorry. Anyway, sorry.
Okay.
That's a little bit excited here. I'm in a different room than I normally film in. So anyway,
no, you're fine.
I had to compare those non-physicals with these angelics I had encountered at death. And these angelics, I've got a few issues with this thing called the Uranta book, but once I get past my personal bias with it, there's certain parts in that book that are very valid information. And one would be the way they describe seraphim and angelic, especially earth angels, all the way up. And there's a classification they call super nanophim. Okay, and the super nanophim are a type of archangel-like, but a slightly different. I'm sure that this is what I saw. And not just seeing them, but feeling them love. I think that I had 100-some people come by and really stop their day and come visit me and wish me well. I think they took that psychokinetic energy, along with that of my family, my loved ones, and channeled that through the creator to heal me to where I am now. And there's been a great deal of questions about why I'm still the way I am after what happened. So, but it goes to things that are beyond. We start dealing with the creator, and people don't want to deal with that right now. They want to turn to something else. You're never supposed to say the word God. Oh my God, don't say that. Oh, because it automatically goes into religion.
Right.
It conforms people, and really is about that. It's about us exploring who we are and what we are, and anyway. So I don't want to take this too far on one thing, and you probably want to talk about other stuff.
Oh no. No, you're fine. No, when I had my near-death experience, because my appendix burst, I was very almost out of it when they put me under anesthesia. So I wasn't fully under anesthesia. So I ended up having a cardiac arrest. And I ended up seeing my mom sitting in the waiting room, and she was like crying, and she was with someone she knew, and she was laying like, what if she doesn't make it and everything. And then everything just went really dark for me, but it was like a comforting dark. Like I wasn't afraid. Like I was okay with it, and it was like starting to turn gray. Like it was starting to turn light. And I'm like, I'm okay with it. And someone was just like, no, you're going back, basically. And I'm just like, well, I'm kind of happy here. And I ended up waking up. I remember waking up when they were pushing me in the hallway. So, and afterwards, I told my mom, I was like, I know I had the cardiac arrest on the table. And she looked at me and she's like, no, you didn't. Like, I could tell she was like, they didn't. I'm like, well, then why were you sitting with so-and-so crying? And she just, like, her face, she just turned so pale. And she's like, how did you know? I'm like, I saw you crying. Like, I was fine,
Did you see your body too?
Eyes on the table. And
did you look down and see your body too?
I did, yes. Yeah.
And now, when this happened, were you fully aware of what happened? Were you kind of aware of what was going on at that point?
I was, yeah. And I seen them. He pulled my appendix out and it broke in his hand, and it went, just whenever he started like swearing. The doctor started swearing. He's like, she should have been up in the OR sooner. And it was pretty bad.
Wow. Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was a mess that day.
And it's worth mentioning. I'm kind of looking over at the comments a little. It's worth mentioning that, we have the ability in this body still to put our cognitive awareness like into what's called the dream body, the astral body. And that's what happens when, when we transition. That's partially what happens. We have another body that, but right now A lot of us, it's super hard to put our cognitive abilities. When we go lay down and go to sleep, a lot of us are out. You got a few of those. I know I am, but I got to do certain things to where I can dream lucidly and have dream attention. So, there's some things like that. But what you just described is that's interesting. So you didn't see the light at all, or was it starting, or?
It was black. It was like pitch black, and then it turned slightly gray. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just pitch black and then slightly gray. And I was like, it was so comforting and warm. And I'm like, I'm okay here. Like, this is fine. And somebody was basically like, no, you have to go back. And I'm like, you have to wake up. And I'm like, I don't want to. And then I ended up waking up when they were pushing me. Like, I could see the light slowly from the ceiling as they were pushing me to my room.
I think where you were is kind of that's about where I was when I was talking to my loved ones. I was still under the delusion that I was normal with because my uncle said I got hurt. I'm like, no, I didn't. What are you talking about? He said, if you get hurt like that again, you'll be here with us. And he points to my grandmother. I was like, there's something wrong. And the thing is that he was very strong, brother. He's a muscular cat. He's really cool, but he had on this. It was this hat, all right, and it looked like a strawberry huckleberry. It's like one of those plant baskets you can empty and wear it as a hat, like a huckleberry fin. And he had these overalls on with these Birkenstocks. And it's not the way this brother dressed at all. And when he's saying that and he's talking to me, I go, man, there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. There's something wrong with you. Why are you dressed like that? And he's telling me I crossed over it. You just can't remember it right now. And then he turned and looked at this tree, turns back, says something else, and I can't tell you what it was to this day, but it scared me. And it made me jump back for whatever reason. And I came up in this fall risk bed. And that's actually when I had as a brain injury patient, what they call a clearing out. I'd actually been conscious for quite a while, but I can't remember it. You know what I mean? I hadn't cleared it out yet. So for me, the near-death experience happened right then. But as my mother had told me before she passed, she said, whatever happened to you when you were in that coma. Before that, you were talking, and it was so, you know what I mean? So as a survivor, I spent a lot of time trying to evaluate before people started asking me to speak about it. Okay, how much of this could have been the last oxygen going and processing through my brain? How much of it, the various things that describe and explain NDE to be less than what they are. And I will tell anyone, listen, my answer to that is this. Reality is real to the perceiver. And had I not come back here, I would have been there. Period. They can say what they want.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. I mean,
I think you were right there too. That corridor.
Yeah.
It's like a corridor, I think.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that's what it was, because I was just me. I was totally by myself. There was nobody else except, towards the end, I got that. I didn't hear a voice outright, but I could kind of hear it in my head, if that makes sense. That I had to go back. Like, there was nobody else but me. Yeah.
I have another question. Bernadette, could you see spirits and dead people before you died or after? Or both?
Well, it was both. So when I was little, I had that experience, and I saw other things, but my mother was always like, no, you didn't, and we don't talk about it. So, she's like, you don't want people to think you're crazy. You're going to keep it down. You're not going to talk about it. And I pushed it down. I ignored things, and there were things that happened along the way that, made me question. And as I got older, and before she passed, she would speak to me about it. She would say, well, you weren't crazy. This is what we saw. She actually had a friend who was a psychic towards the end of his life. I had told him basically that I knew he had cancer, but right before he had come to the house, I said, I had this weird dream about you. I'd never met this person before. I said, I had this weird dream about you. And he looked at me and he's like, I have cancer. How did you know that? And I was just like, I don't know. And he looked at my mom and he's like, you need to stop telling her that she's crazy. You need to stop telling her what she sees is not there. Stop trying to protect her. And he's like, you're seeing as much as she is, and you're trying to push it down. You both need to stop. So once I had the near-death experience, it took off more, I think, because in the elevator going up, there was the doctor. It was like the emergency elevator. So it was the doctor, the gurney, and my mom. But at the foot of my bed, there was a nurse. And my mom had been a nurse, and this nurse was dressed in the old-fashioned way in pictures I had seen, but she had blonde hair and she had green eyes, and she was at the foot of my bed, and I had sat up and I looked straight at her, and I looked around and then I laid back down. And afterwards I said, well, where's the nurse who had taken care of me in the elevator? And my mom said there was no nurse in the elevator. And I said, yes, there was. And I just grabbed her. My mom said, they don't dress like that anymore, because this was like the early 2000s. She's like, not even nursing students dress like that anymore. I said, that's what I saw. And then I said, where was my night nurse? And
they want me to say this. They want me to say something. I'm going to say something. They want me to say that, be aware for people listening that there are many different forms of death angels, and that they do different things to what you're seeing when you're describing a death angel. I started picking that up immediately, and they're not always the sinister things we think, the Green Ripper. It's not like that always, you know what I mean? But anyway, sorry, please keep talking.
No, she was, I wasn't afraid of her. She seemed very nice. And then after I'd gotten in my room and I gotten settled and my mom went home, this young nurse came in and she's like, do you want anything to eat or anything? And I'm like, I'm starving. Sure. So she brought me sherbet. And then she's like, if you need anything else, call. And she left. This older nurse came in. She's like, where did you get that? I'm like, my nurse brought it for me.
Oh, wow.
She took it, she threw it in the garbage, and she's like, I'm your nurse and you're not to eat that yet.
Wow.
I'm like, the younger nurse brought it for me. She's like, there's no younger nurse on. It's just me. I'm like, what do you mean it's just you? She's like,
and she seemed completely corporeal, didn't she? Yeah. She seemed completely corporeal, didn't she? That she brought enough strong enough to bring you something that is physical, Yeah. That's interesting. That normal earthbounds can't do that. That takes a whole lot of energy for them. That's something else, completely right there. That's
she was very young. I mean, she was very nice, and she put it right down. And she told me if I need anything. And when I told the older nurse that, she's like, there's nobody else but me. And I'm just like, lady, I know what I saw. I saw.
Man, I'm getting a really good feeling from this. That's very cool. Yeah. I'm getting a really good feeling from what you're saying. Thank you. That's very cool. Yeah. And something. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
No. I interrupt you twice. Go ahead, please.
Oh, well, I was gonna say I just had major surgery. There was no way I could even gotten up and walked at that point. Without pulling my stitches. So I was kind of like, well, how did I get this? And she just didn't want to hear it all. She's just like, you're not to have it. I'll get you ice chips. You'll be fine. I'm like, okay, if you want to. But yeah.
You said something I think is really vital. And it's something I experienced too. I've always been, quote, medium psychic, but I was Mr. Obsessed with hiding everything. No idea. I was never going to tell people. When I got attacked by that disincarnate at 7 years old, I was like, oh God, please take this. I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want that. You know what I mean? Trying to get rid of it and things, so I never wanted to tell anyone or wanted anybody to know. Even when I got blasted as being a contactee and NDE person, I never wanted anyone to know I was a hypnotist. Are you kidding me? No way. Stuff like that. But I was obsessed about hiding it always, and I was successful with it for the most part. And then I have this accident, and after recovering, my gifts changed in a way that they became so intense, more like a wave, that I couldn't hide it anymore. And I started getting detected by people I've known for years. I've been tricking them for years, and they started realizing that something was different. So eventually I had to just step forward and embrace it and try to go forward. I became really interested when I met a lady. Actually, I followed her work for a while, but I spoke with her just before COVID hit in 2019 February. Mary Rodwell, and I had become interested in her work, especially when I was recovering, because she started talking about these lifetime experiencers, contactees, who have this traumatic accident of some type, and how for her, she was mentioning star beings would stop the space-time continuum and pull the contactee out of the situation for a millisecond or two and then put them back. And how the people that have this happen, these contactees, there's odd things about their recovery. They recover quick. They recover in a way that they shouldn't have been for the way that they were hurt. And it's very unusual. Well, I took interest in that because I had a lot of medical professionals, telling me I shouldn't be the way that I was, or something similar to that, just how odd it was. So I just took an interest in that, you know what I mean, of how often that might actually happen and the work she was doing trying to record the data of that. So it's something, I think that's worthy of mentioning how often that happens. And I think angelics can do it, star beings can do it. When you're dealing with any species or creation that can manipulate the space-time continuum, all bets are off.
And no, and I think that's interesting as well, because, and I think that's, it also runs in people's families as well, experiences, because I think my mom had a bunch of experiences that she did not want to talk about, and she didn't want to acknowledge. That's why she tried to protect me, because what my one memory was I was a teenager, and we were going into a Kmart, and above the Kmart was like this disc. It was like a cigar shaped thing, and it was like weirdly it didn't look like a balloon, but it was just weirdly vibrating. And there was a man and woman off to the left standing by the car, and they were talking and just kind of looking at it. And we looked at it too, but it was just them. But there was a bunch of other people. It's just like the four of us only saw it. I stopped dead and I'm like, what is that? Like, do you see that? And they just kind of glanced over, but then they kind of looked back up. And my mom's like, looked up, and she just like, yeah, I see it. Let's go in the store. I mean, she put her hand on my back and she pushed me. And I'm like, what was that? Like, did you, and she's like, we're not talking about it. It's done. It's over. I'm like, okay.
Something worth mentioning about that is that so often I found out now, especially that when someone sees a UFO like that, and there's people around, sorry, I'm trying to plug this in, that don't actually see
you're
it.
Okay.
That is actually a targeted contact a lot of times. If this is not some type of a government creation, a lot of time this is a targeted contact. And the amount of information we get subliminal and also superconscious is unreal, because sometimes those creatures in those craft, where they're from, their vibration is quicker than ours. So it's like we get things subconsciously and we don't know it till we start messing with things like hypnosis, which our subconscious records everything. You can start accessing it. And the amount of people that get information just like the way you described, and it most frequently happens when you're in a crowd of people. There's 10 of you, and 2 are going right there, and I was going, okay, where? You know what I mean? Yeah, and you don't think that, like, I'm not important enough for a whole ship of beings, or maybe a whole, let's talk Star Trek, a whole federation of beings to stop what they're doing to communicate just with me on the collective conscious level. Yeah, that's happening a lot, and we need to expand our parameters of contact. And something I want to hit real quick on here in the comment section. I'm watching somebody it keeps drawing my eye. They're going by AJK. They said some really heavy stuff about they were dealing with the air conditioner and other things. I think they're referring to a ghost messing with them at their house. When I go into a lot of the houses I've been in, the first thing that I see that the ghosts will start, the earthbounds will start doing, the ghosts, to get the people out, is they start messing with the plumbing. There's something wrong with the plumbing, the black stuff coming up out of the drains and stuff like that. And then they start the people get that fixed, the plumbing fixed, and then they jump over to the car, especially if it's in the garage. They get in the liquids in there, the water and the things in there, and start messing with that. Then they mess with the electronics a little bit, the lights, and they always tend to use closets, especially if it's a kid that passed. They love to play with other kids that are still living in closets. And how I think ghosts use the Casimir effect, like it's an orgone box, to generate more free energy, more life energy, to be able to move out of there and interact with us more or mess with us. But anyway, what you're talking about, air conditioning, yeah, it's got liquids in there and air freon in there. They'll mess with it. And that's a big one that'll cause you to get out of there. Oh, gosh, how many times is all this stuff going to break in here? I'm going to get out of here. Or that weird black soot that's on the wall or in the door handle sometimes. Really odd. Or flies in there. Amityville horrors type of stuff. Flies seem to come in those places a lot. So just the things I've seen in some of these haunted locations, if you really do work in them, it's interesting.
We actually had that with the flies. It's funny you mentioned that. We actually had that with the flies, and they were coming up through the basement. We could not find out how they were getting into the basement and even coming into it was awful. It was just unimaginable. I've never seen so many flies in my life. And then that's how I had contacted Lon Strickler along with the other stuff that was happening. I mean, it was
Hey, sometimes will
unimaginable.
they just be gone? Sometimes just gone, and then
Yeah,
they'll be back, just like gone.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned the closet as well, because my son has actually saw something in his closet. It was very funny because the closet door had come off the rung,
Hmm.
and he had started saying that he sees a little girl. And tonight he actually told me that, like, since you broke the closet door, that's where she came from.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
If it's an orgone box, the box you broke it open, not as many free energy radicals getting out. She came out with it. Yeah, and that
Yeah,
was probably where she
yeah.
stayed most of the time in the house, as the place to kind of, and a lot of these houses like that probably have two
Hmm.
portals in it. There's like a male and a female portal. A lot of people
Hmm.
don't realize. I see them go in these houses. They're gonna close the portal, but they don't close both of them. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And people still have activity after that. So
Yeah, and
it's
he
wow.
said that she doesn't live here. She went back home because we did a clearing and everything, and he's like, she went back home, and his only problem with her was that she played with his toys. He did not like her because she played with his toys, and
Wow.
she wanted him to play with her, and she touched his trucks, and he did not like that. And I'm like, I I think I've seen her at the bottom of the stairs, and
Fascinating.
yeah, it was very odd because I was upstairs, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a little girl with a giant bow in her hair. And
Does he still see your son? Do you still see?
he has told me he saw her, but since we've cleared the house, he said she went home. She went home. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, if you see her again, you have to tell us. And
Mhm.
it's weird because we don't talk about any of this in front of him. We will not, because I don't want him to hear it and then start making things up. But he came to us and he told us that there's a little girl in his room and she's on fire. And
Oh,
it was
really?
just like,
On fire? Really?
yeah,
Is that
it
that's
was
how
just,
she passed? There was a
yeah,
fire in that house, huh?
yeah. And well, not here.
Wow.
There was a fire in this house, but when I asked him, I said, did she live here? He said, no, no, up the street. And
Huh?
I'm like, up the
Roaming
street.
around.
I'm like, I don't know anyone else's house, but I'm just like, okay. I'm like, well, you need to tell her she needs to go home. And he goes, I did, but she doesn't listen. And I'm like, okay. But
Wow.
now she's gone. So if she comes back, then
Hopefully,
yeah,
yeah, she needs to be crossed. She needs to be
yeah,
crossed over.
yeah.
This is important you're saying this because, I just got through doing a show with my friend Jessica Jones, and we had talked about, some of these haunted locations that they do these tours and everything. And, oh, they do cleansing and stuff. Are they going out? But the bottom line is they're trapping souls in some of these places, keeping them trapped there. Trying to go in and feeding them emotions and things like that, and touring them. And
Making a
it's bad.
spectacle.
They need to be
Yeah,
crossed over. And I've
yeah,
said several of these places, like when Jess was remote viewing, a couple of them were showing it. You knew they're haunted already, but showing kids being trapped there on the soul level,
yeah,
and that's terrible. You know what I mean? Or just people overall. So some of these ghost location, the ghost tours, be very careful with people that go through that and go through those places. It's just not,
yeah,
or control that type of property. It's really not what this is about, and it's exploitation of
yeah,
earthbounds.
yeah.
I mean,
No,
it's bad enough anyway, whatever they're stuck here for. And
I
I've come
agree.
across some. I've come across some now that it's odd when you cross one of them over and they start talking to you in a way that's not even common inflections.
Yeah,
And I asked her, where did you join with the client at? And they say it's such and such castle in Germany or somewhere, because they travel the world and they're
hmm,
touring these ancient places, and they picked this person up, and they've been here what they're talking about, hundreds and hundreds of years.
yeah,
And I've got ones way longer than that. So,
yeah,
and time for them is nothing like it is for us, but just long enough to where they can tell me it was before y'all messed up the world. It's not even a world anymore.
right.
Mm.
Yeah. No,
Food
I
for
understand.
thought.
I understand that. We went. My boyfriend took me to this museum. I'm going to call it a museum. I'm not going to say where it is. And we walked around the outside of it. It is the most eeriest place I've ever been to. There are no birds. There are no bugs. You cannot hear anything. It's so quiet. And we went down. We walked around this one path, and there were people on the other side. And the lady, she was not alive. She was standing there glaring at everyone, and she's like, I'm trying to figure out how to say it without, because we're on there. She said they come here and they look at us like we're in a zoo. but she used a different word, you know. And I looked at her and I like stared at her, and there was a gentleman next to her, and I'm just like staring at them, and she's like, "Can you see me? You can see, you're looking at me." I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I turned to him. I'm like, we need to go. Like, and she started like coming towards us. I'm like, no, we're leaving now. And I just turned my back on her and I walked away, and I could hear her yelling at me. Like I could see her, and I'm just like, no, I cannot see you. I don't, you know, at the time he didn't know that I could see these things. He didn't know hardly anything. He didn't even really want to believe this house was haunted. So I'm just like, I don't see anything. So,
you know, I'll throw an interesting one at you, okay? And
okay.
somebody mentioned generational curses. Let's talk about that too. But this is something interesting here, okay? So this has been a couple years ago now, but I had this client, all right, and this particular earthbound that I crossed over, okay, it was a female, but before this, it's a female, and it had told me, you know, that it kept referring to this individual, and that was a friend of the client's, all right, and like a group of them that went out for like football or something, all right, a football group or something, and they keep saying that they look just like they did last time. And I started inquiring more, what do you mean? And referring to this individual, saying that they still look like they did before, the long dark hair, they're tall, and they're describing a spirit that they'd been with, married to, that died, has reincarnated, and they're still here trapped as an earthbound spirit. And they've joined with the client, and the client has gone, they express itself as a negative behavior pattern. And what happens? The client has gone and had an affair with this person when they're happily married and had no problems at all, but this desire for this person, you know, then I cross over this spirit, and the individual saying, well, gosh, that person, oh gosh, ain't even attractive. They don't even look like my loved one, and stuff like that. But
yeah.
that desire and how it goes away. And so it can be addictions, love, a whole bunch of different things. All right. And it's an issue to deal with this. How do you deal with this when our society doesn't even want to talk about and believe in past lives? Right. We're talking about not just one earthbound spirit, but somebody that's been here incarnated and come back, that died and come back. That's real serious, you know?
Yeah.
Or like the one I talk about a lot, you know, is one of the earlier ones I had. This gentleman, a guy, and he tells me, one is a female client, all right? And first thing starts telling me, oh, I heard you were coming, and you're going to try to trick me. You're trying to trick me. I said, they told me you're coming. Well, first of all, who's they that told you I was coming? First, you never get that a straight answer. Mm-hmm. Second is, how am I trying to trick you? Were you going to try to make me go in that light? I'm not going in that light. I won't do it. I said, why not? You know what the answer was? Mm-hmm. Well, because I've done some bad things to some people. It could be hell. And also, if I go in there, I'll have to change. I can't get another drink. And then this individual tells me they was at this bar because the client went to a bar and they jumped on them at this bar, said, oh, they were light. They had a lot of light on them. They were brighter than the other people in there. So they didn't know how to have fun. They were kind of awkward. So I wanted to help them have fun. So I joined with them to have a drink. And then says this, but you know, they could really put them away. And when I get them so drunk that they black out, I feel the most alive. And the way he had passed in is actually by my high school that I went to. Across the street over there's like a bar. And across the street is like all these houses. I mean, they're right there on this bar. It's in the middle of the neighborhood. And he said he lived in one of those houses. And he went like on last call. He went back over to his house to do a couple of rails of cocaine, got real good and wired, and came back for last call. And his chest started hurting, and he fell out in the street and died out in the street. But his last thoughts were, God, last drink. Yeah. So what happened when he crossed over? He didn't cross over. He went over to the bar. And he told me, I've been hanging out at that bar for years, jumping on people, but everybody's all burned out in there now. What, have you been draining them all? They just got drunks anyway, you know, and then, so I looked up. How long has this bar been?
And then you make it worse.
Yeah, the bar's been there like 55 years.
Oh my
You know what
God.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that's
Anyway, I don't want to go too far on that, but it's just these little things like that that people are talking about on here that I think is worthy. And the other
mhm,
is these spiritual these generational attachments. And I will
yeah.
say that the ones that I've seen and dealt with, a lot of times it will come through land too. There'll be cursed land that people are on, like maybe it's Native American land, like where I live here. A lot of bloodshed around here, so some of this land is cursed in a way that you've got not just souls of some settlers that were there trapped there going forward, but these
Mhm,
generational curses come like that, and then you pass them to your kids. They go from person to person or skip a generation or two, and it's the same things. It's like these chains, they have to be broken. You know what I mean? And sometimes these generational curses go so far back you don't even know who those relatives were. It's generations ago, or someone
yeah.
that made a pact. A lot of people making pacts with these
Mhm.
dark forces, and then that
Well,
then your offspring has to carry that burden.
yeah.
Very
Yeah.
generous of us, isn't it?
Right? Who do you think they are? That's very interesting that you said he said they were coming, that they told him you were coming.
Two things. One would be the other earthbounds. Some of them, because some of them will jump from person to person. They don't always stay with the same person. Like I've dealt with like a group of kids that was like in an accident. They, several of them may have passed at the same time, but they didn't all go to the same place. And you got a couple of them that are jumping into people. And what are they doing? They're getting these people to go party a lot because they were kids saying, I was in high school, but I went to like this and this school and I was involved in this and this. And my parents were so strict, I never got to do anything. So they never got to go to any parties. They find somebody who's a college student and they can go to parties. They get them to party real hard, getting real tore up. But then, as any addiction, they don't
Mhm.
keep getting the same buzz out of it that they did. It doesn't last. It starts fading. So they jump to another person, and then that person burns out. So what do they start doing before they leave the person? A lot of times they start pushing them. Well, such and such comes around. You can't stand them. You should argue with them. Stuff like that in your mind, especially if you're married to somebody that they don't like. So let's say it's like the female that had that guy in her. You know what I mean? He's telling me, I'm not gonna cross over. I'm not gonna cross over. You know how I got him to cross over? Because his loved ones are already there. I finally got him at a love frequency. He could see that. All
Mhm.
right. And then, what I used is this basic cognitive behavioral. That's what I've done my whole adult life, career
Yeah.
wise, is cognitive behavioral. And I,
Mhm.
I said, well, his dad's there. And I'm like, and it's very chatty until that happened, until you notice that. I said, what's going on? And they'll say without suggestion, oh, what's my dad is standing there. And but I'm still not going that light. I said, that's fine. But you notice something about your dad? What? I said, he's a little bit younger than what he was when he died, huh? Yes. Know something else? Got a perfect body, doesn't he? Do you want a perfect body? Isn't that worth changing for? Or you want to keep living through this female? And he started yelling at me. No, I don't like it when she has sex. I don't like it. I bet you don't. But I mean, it's a trip to hear somebody that's very effeminate talking like a trucker for a second.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's very very bizarre when really they technically what we would call in hypnosis a flopper. They're about like
Mhm.
this. You know what I mean? But I mean these that's when these earthbounds will come forward if you know how. But
Mhm.
anyway, the point of that being that a lot of times they join with people because they can't get acknowledged. I've had a couple of them tell me, I don't talk to me about God. One said to me, I said, why not?
Mhm.
Well, because if there was a God, it wouldn't allow us to be all down here bumping into each other and you all ignoring us forever. Boy, that sounds a lot like hell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The type of hell. Anyway, sorry, I'm not going to that.
No,
You want to
I
talk
I
about
totally
aliens?
agree with you. And the sad part is like I said I've ignored them some without looking crazy. Like what do? You can't just stand there and talk to basically air. That's what everyone else is going to see, you know. I mean, it's difficult. It's being alive. You're trapped between a rock and a hard place when you see, a spirit. That's bad. So I do have a couple questions for you.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
So, and they're all from Vincent. So Vincent asked, "Can you tell us about when your alien encounters started?"
Sorry. First of all, great name. I love the
You're
name Vincent. Ron Perlman played Vincent Beauty and the Beast, one of my favorite characters. Um, Actually, what I can remember him starting really is 5, and that was waking up in my bed and being startled because I wouldn't be at home, and I'd be in this room. It was a room with like black table on it and like kind of gray walls. On this black table, you had some things on there like a feather, a bowl of water, and these balls, these silver balls, look like steelies. And the first thing is you have to actually move the feather with your mind. Then you try to start moving the water, stirring it. Then you can start moving the balls, and the balls did different things. They like would circle around each other. And to me, those balls looked a lot like I said. I use movie references in the movie Starman with Jeff Bridges. He has these balls, these steelies that he uses quite a bit. They look like that, but there's several of them, and you can manipulate them with your mind. But that's like the last task in that room. But to me, that now as I got older, I kind of think that was some type of a ship or something. So I count that as extraterrestrial type of some sort of contact. And then they got even more prolific as I got a little older until I got to the 6th grade, and I had something called the acid rain experience, I call it. All this is on my YouTube channel. I've got some illustrations of it also, but that's when in the 6th grade, the experiences actually crossed over from the stuff at night, not going to sleep and waking up not at home, just when you drift off for a minute on one of these craft or whatever. And then the next day feeling like you've not slept. You've been awake like the whole time. It's a kind of miserable feeling. When you're younger, you can deal with it a little more, it's insomnia type of thing. But that happened. And real quick, I'll just say what it was. It was, I woke up on this craft and I see these in this projector, these were over this like a snow mountain pass, and there are two crafts out here, UFO looking things, saucers, sucking, like they're pretty big, but they're sucking up what looks like clouds under them, and then they're emitting like a light coming out underneath after that. And this being floating on these deck plates, this insectoid, is telling me telepathically. And first, let me say it's a little disconcerting because in those situations like that I've been in, these beings are answering me telepathically before I can formulate my questions. You know what I mean? The questions are there, but you've not really thought it out yet, and they're answering it. That's very disconcerting to a degree,
yeah.
T. Yeah, yeah. It's things like that. Anyway, point being though that they're telling me one is something I call the M&M effect, that the metals in our atmosphere and the microwaves are very dangerous for them and hazardous, and that the acid rain is causing great problems on our planet, and they're trying to do some reverse engineering type of stuff, but it wasn't going that good. Now they're having trouble with it or something. Now I never heard those terms at all. Okay, and I was trying to think out, are you lying to me and things like that, and they're already answering, But anyway, about 2 weeks later, I'm in class in the 6th grade, and our teacher had us read this thing called the Scholastic News. And once a week on Friday, she'd have somebody get up there and read the main article. And that week, I got chose. Always traumatic, as you can imagine. You hope you can spell right. Everybody, he can't read. You know how that is. Anyway,
right. Yes.
Yeah, on Front Street, But this, I'll never forget it. But this particular Scholastic News had at the front of it the Statue of Liberty. And the article was about the Statue of Liberty. At that time, was parts of it were shut down due to it being repainted and reconstruction from damage from acid rain. And when I read that in that article, I yelled it out. People started laughing. But nonetheless, long story short, that's when this crossed over so much in my life. There's no doubt this was really happening. You know what I mean? Scientifically, that's why I like really science to back up some of my experiences. It's a good foundation because the stuff is so freaking weird. What else are you going to use?
Right. No, I agree. I totally agree.
Well, I hope that answers this question.
No, that sounds perfect to me. Vincent also asked, what do the extraterrestrials want?
He said around puberty, somebody said. For me, my experiences stopped from about 12 to about 17. I didn't have as many in that age group right there. And in the 17, they kicked in hard. That's the difference between the childhood experiences onto the adult onset experiences I was describing. Sorry, you asked a question. I'm sorry, but that came off last.
Oh, you're okay. No, you're fine. Vincent
Well, I
asked,
think
what do the extraterrestrials want?
the ones I dealt with, or all of them. I mean, these got. I think we have to deal with. We've got about 1,000 or thousands of factions coming here. It's much more than just the Greys and the reptilians, and that's all we really hear about in the media. When you look at things like the Free Foundation, CCRA, it's called now, the former Foundation Research for Extraterrestrial Encounters, ran by Ray Hernandez, a friend of mine. Great great survey they did, 4 or 5 phase survey to real contactees and experiencers worldwide. Thousands and thousands of real contactees took it. And it's great, the information they're consolidating and the graphs they've got. And it turns out that we would think when we listen to the media that when they asked about negative and positive encounters, you think that it would be skewed tremendously towards the negative. That's all we hear about is abduction and cloning and cattle mutilations, but in reality, it was skewed the other way. The amount of positive encounters was much more, as opposed to the negative. I represent that. Although my encounters were life disrupting in terms of its different vibration, you can't think about anything else after this stuff happens to you, but it wasn't negative. There was no sexual connotation to it. There was no torture. Nothing like that, sickness being on these craft, but that's some natural thing that they're calling temporal aphasia that happens there. But anyway, as far as what they want, so you've got the ones that obviously wanted domination, and you can tell whoever our government is working with, whether it's the little grays, the EBNs, the reptilians, they're dark. It's a dark thing going on here with whatever's going on government-wise. A lot of the craft we're seeing government-related and they're working with are just, I think, dark entities. They're dark species or ones lower vibration. And you've got the other ones like I've dealt with. And I was forced to deal with it. Like when I dealt with people like Rudy Shields and a couple of these astrophysicists that took the time to talk to me and took an interest in my encounters, Rudy Shields is telling me things like, for example, this insectoid had told me that they come from the area to focus on is about, 900 million light years out and beyond the space-time continuum. And that took me to a place out there called Abell 2237. That's a cluster of super galaxies out there close to the Big Bang, they think. So anyway, going forward. So I think it's a lot about, one, the Earth matrix is important, and our soul life memories, and remembering who we are in the soul life memory. We incarnate here. I think a lot of people listening agree that we're some type of immortal souls to a degree. But you know what? We incarnate here as immortal souls, almost completely devoid of soul life memories. What the hell is that? That sucks. That's like being told, you're in 12th grade, but guess what? You can't remember kindergarten to 11th grade. That sucks.
Yeah.
It does. And there's something fundamentally wrong with this place that we incarnate here like that, and our soul life memories don't get to help the human race. And we're in all this darkness down here with these beings that are incarnating here, just like you and I, that are obviously demonic. They may walk around in bodies, but they're destroying our biosphere. Right. All this dark stuff. That's why I take a line. I don't mean anything rude towards the SS people and those people having contact like that. I've interacting with a few, like Tony Rodriguez and people like that. They're very cool. But there is a dark thing kind of on that SSP. What they're doing to the people that have been involved in that, how they're using that to psychically control a lot of us. I'm picking up. Okay, all right. Sorry. They want me to mention this. There's this thing like when you incarnate into this solar system, you come through this net. And what it does, it's electrical in a way, I think, and it wipes you of your soul life memories. And you incarnate here and devoid of that. Then that's when you start getting caught in a re-cycle deal. You can't remember. So you may have incarnated here 100 times, don't remember. That's a problem.
Right.
That's prison. No. That's prison planet type of stuff.
I agree with you. One of my earliest memories is I remember being in the car as a child and seeing people on the edge of the clouds just standing there. And I was afraid of them. And my mom was like, I don't see anything, but why are you afraid? They're angry at me. Like, I don't know why, but they're staring down and they're angry at me. And she's like, okay, but I haven't seen them since, but I have that very vivid memory of it. And it's like one of those memories that I have, and I can picture them, and I can picture, I mean, these were literal people standing on the edge of the clouds.
You know, that's not, I think, as far out as it sounds at all. The reason why I say that, when I was younger, like high school, but get out of high school, I took a real interest in like Trevor Constable and William Reich, and I started making cloud busters. They're really not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started working with them a little bit, and I started trying to combust nimbus clouds. And it's actually, and I found out later that the nimbus clouds, what actually holds them together is what's called DOR, deadly orgone radiation. I hear a lot of people talking about orgone, but they don't talk about that. They're pyramids and everything else, but they don't talk about DOR. Why not? Anyway, get off that. But what I didn't know, without grounding these correctly into a running water at the time, I was actually collecting DOR with this nimbus cloud in these devices. I started not feeling good sometimes. Work these things, I got the Kodak with the infrared film and a UV light on it. Started taking pictures around these machines, these cloud busters, and you start seeing these things around there on the film that look like these amoebas or almost unicellular organisms, a little bit bigger, and they're hanging around the machine. What they are, they're feeding on that DOR. People have asked me, are those archons? Hey, I don't know. To me, they looked more like amoeba, almost biological, very much so. I think they're in our atmosphere all the time anyway. We just don't quite see them. Things like the movie From Beyond by H.G. Lovecraft. They turn on the resonator, they start seeing that stuff. Whoa! So they're always there. Just don't move in the field of energy. They'll see you anyway.
Right. No, and I mean, I still look for them. Like, I had forgot about them for a very long time. And just one day I thought about it, and I'm just like, oh my God, I remember that. What happened to it? And I'm like looking up, I'm like, but I don't see it now. Like, was it a dream?
Probably not. You have the ability to see. So you may have been perceiving one of these beings, and we have the cognitive dissonance thing that will make them into something slightly different. But the point is, you're perceiving the awareness of it, the consciousness of it. When you go through really the gates of dreaming, or people talk about, and really all these cool things people are doing with dreaming, what I found out when I passed that last gate, I found out I'm just standing in the middle of an electron impulse. And then it becomes the information. Do you have enough dream attention, perception, to see the other energy generating beings in your field of perception? Because they hide in the phantasmagorical images of our dreamscape. They're masters of that. And what they do is they show up as these odd objects in your dream, super odd. When I first got a little bit better, this happened. I walk into my apartment. I was working these 12-hour days. I walk in. I was so proud. I had this first Dynasty Ming vase on the table, the glass table. I was like, man, I forgot I broke that table years before, but it's sitting there, and I was like, man, I was so proud. Took me a shower, got back out, look at that, man, that looks great. I started sitting there thinking, man, I'm living in this apartment, and I got a first Ming vase. This thing's worth millions and millions. I ain't got no alarm system. You start clicking like, something's wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you start focusing on that odd object and allow it to turn into what it is, and then try to interact or follow or whatever the case may be. But it's about identifying it. Or the worst ones that are masquerading in our dreamscape, they come like our loved ones. They show up like our loved ones in your dreams, and they're always being just pricks or something. Excuse my language. Doing something where where it's like, man, why would my father be doing it? Why would my mom be doing it? Get away from me, things like that, because they're getting your emotions going. They're rallying you up, and they're feeding, just like the shadows do that I've seen on the outside of energy field when walking around. They're doing the same thing. They jump on people too.
Yeah. So why do you think extraterrestrials choose a person or a family? Why do you think they would just choose? Like, is it at random? Is there something about them, about their families?
I think one is, a lot of people want to go in, is it negative blood, this and that. That may be definitely a connection too. But I think a lot of us, they've been following us on the soul level also. And also, what kind of interactions have we had with these beings on the soul level, previous incarnations on Earth? Have we been these beings a lot? We can't remember these civilizations, incarnations. We can't remember our incarnations here, let alone the one that are extra galactic, maybe extra universal. You know, like I was saying, Rudy Shields said when I said they're from a bell out there, and he's saying, Barry, they're from another universe. I said, no, it's another galaxy. He's like, Barry, that doesn't hold up mathematically, what you're saying, but it does hold up universally. And what does I want to say? I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm not. What is I going to say? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
But when looking at it in parameters of like some of the things I've seen, it makes more sense. You know, I've seen a craft. God, I have my sketches with me. I'm sorry. On my YouTube channel, I call this the metamorphing organic UFO. And what this thing did, at first it looks like a metal saucer, Palladian type of craft, like that type of thing. And it morphs into what looks like this, what is called a tripyramidal Merkaba, these crystals with stalagmites on it, with light pulsing on the inside, like a chemical or bioluminescence from the inside. All the crystals I've seen them using seem to do that, something Earth crystals don't do, except for the quasis, but we're just starting into that. Anyway, when I see this thing change this pattern of configuration, this change, someone else saw this. One, it was hard to take perceptually, okay, cognitively, which is hard to watch. Right, to see this thing change. But what I know now is that this was actually a ship that was changing its configuration to a pattern of configuration to its destination when it goes through one of these Mako things to another universe. Okay, so it's changing its pattern of configuration, and its pattern of unfoldment is to match its destination in another universe, which may be based on the crystal, maybe based on something different than the spin that our universe is. Everything here is based on the spin, from the atoms all the way up to the galaxies, in that way to the planets. It's circular, spherical, and the spin. But if you go to something that's a different universe, it could be based on the cube. It could be based on the pyramid, amorphous metals. And if it's based on the cube, is that why we have some cubes like I've seen on these craft, the big ones, that are more than just inertial dampers, but it's actually a way to transfer information and matter from one dimension, one universe to another? That's done through certain shapes. Very food for thought when expanding the parameters of contact. It's a lot more than what we're told. And for me, very little of it is what I experienced, what I read about in the media. Only now I think we're starting to breach that, and how much the consciousness and the contact experience are connected. They're not separate.
Right.
You know?
And I wonder about that because, like I said, I haven't had any contact with any aliens. I don't know how you would like term aliens, but I haven't that I know of. I've only seen the one craft when I was a teenager, and then I saw one about 2 years ago, I would say. And it was very odd because I was sitting in the yard and my son was playing in the lower yard, and I thought it was a blimp. I honestly thought it was a blimp. It was very shiny. And I have been talking to my boyfriend on the phone, and I'm like, why didn't you tell me that, there was a blimp flying around? I would have made sure that we were watching for it. He's like, there's no blimp flying around. I don't see anything, because he could see it coming, from where he's coming from work. And I'm like, yeah. And I said, I'll hang up and I'll take a picture. And it gone past the neighbor's house. And I'm like, well, it's too late. I missed my chance of taking a picture. And he's like, okay. And I went to say something and I froze, because here it comes back like it was like, oh, you missed me, here I am. And I'm like, something's not right about that. And it went, back the other way it came. And then I watched it circle around. And it was making the weirdest patterns that was not normal at all.
Like, let me just throw this in, okay? I think you're wrong. I think you're a total contactee. I think you're a big one, and you feel like one to me, all right? And when I say that, I would probably get laughed at this, but what I'm going to say is valid. I stole this certain term from Doctor Who. I'm a Doctor Who fan, but they use a term called Artron energy, all right? And it's a way that they detect people that are been in the TARDIS, all right? And the truth, I think that's a reality to that, because some of us that have been on board some of these craft or around some of these beings that use their energy and their kundalini to biofuel the craft itself.
Mm-hmm.
And these things have been through these makos, these black holes, these wormholes. Okay, they emit this energy that they emit that gets in our cells. I think it saturates our cells as contactees. And then I can detect that on another contactee. I can feel it. You know what I mean? Like, for example, I came into contact a few years ago with probably one of the biggest whistleblowers, more crap surrounding them that I won't even go into, that I don't like. Okay, I don't like that stuff. It's just, but when they want to come up and hug me, first I'm not the huggy type, all right?
Yeah.
But I let them do it so I could get a read on this person. And the first thing I had to accept is I felt this Artron energy on them, this note. So I knew they either have been on board a craft that's going through these wormholes, or they've been around beings that have done it. I have to accept that first, then go into the bureaucracy. You know what I mean? But anyway, but I feel that coming off you. All right. So I would say this: the ways you've described these two experiences, the one you just said, goodness, that's contact if I've never heard it. So I think that you should definitely, if you've never been through a hypnotic regression, find yourself a good hypnotist and see what was recorded on your subconscious and superconscious during the time you saw that. And I wouldn't be surprised. Okay. I guess you probably had some weird dreams a few nights after that. You might want to think about that.
I think I did. I also had strange bruises. I did. It was very weird.
Strange what?
Bruises.
Oh,
like
really?
on my. Yeah, it was very weird, and I bumped into something, but I can't remember if I did. So I'm not 100% sure where I got them. But when I saw that, that I'm gonna call it a blip because that's what it looked like to me, and like I got really bad pictures of it, and when I saw it, like my son was down in the yard, I had just this gut fear, I don't know how else to explain it, but I literally, I don't care if the whole town heard me. I screamed for him to come up by me. And just like, it must have been such a bad scream because the look on his face, like, and he came up and he's like, what did I do? I'm like, you stay up here. You stay by me. You stay by me until your father gets home. And it was just like panic. I started to panic and I don't know why. It was just so.
You're describing a negative encounter.
Yeah.
I mean, you're describing bruises, great fear. And remember, once again, it happens real quick. If you have beings of this type that either communicate or take you and bring you back within a millisecond, it's not going to be, I mean, that's not joking either. You know what I mean? That happens to a lot of people. And so but it's still worth exploring. Yeah. And I'll say this, a lot of times there are people say, oh, whatever happens, don't use hypnosis. Don't do that because you want it. Who are they to tell you not to explore your own consciousness, your own memories? They have no right to tell you that.
No, but I would want to know. I certainly would want to know. Yeah.
I think. Do you remember the dreams you had? Were they dreams about? Were they like monsters? After you saw that, were they monster dreams, or were they? What were the beings in the dreams? Do you remember that?
I don't fully remember. I remember having a dream about, I think, my mother and someone else, and they weren't acting right. And I had started waking up in the dream, and I'm like, this is not right. You're not them. You're not acting right. And I woke up. I woke straight up after that. And I didn't feel like I had slept. I was sore, and I didn't feel like I slept.
Boy.
Yeah.
That's total contactee stuff. So that would be my advice on that. Find a hypnotist that you're comfortable with. You can get with me. I'll do it for you. And just explore that a little bit. And when people do that, of course, we got to embrace ourselves because sometimes it may not be all positive stuff like I had. Right. You know what I mean? And some of it was positive, but it still is like you're getting sick on there or whatever the case might be, or just stuff that blows you away. You don't have a frame of reference for it. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. But finding out is we owe that to ourselves. And I think that's kind of what is happening in our society right now. That's going to push us into what they call quote unquote a type 1 civilization, where we're using the sun as our primary power source. But also when we start becoming part of the galactic community, which this planet has been before. Look, it's obvious. It's on hieroglyphs. It's on cave walls. It's happened before. And for us to think that ancient man was quite as primitive as they're telling us now is, I think, not accurate. But that's another story. Anyway,
The only thing that really bothered, like the gut reaction that I had, like I have
Hmm.
never, like there was a possum wandering through the yard at one point, and I didn't even have that reaction. Like I wasn't that afraid of like my kid getting bit by a possum. I didn't like scream at him to come up like that. But when I saw this craft, I had the worst. Like even thinking about it, my stomach starts to turn. There was just something not right.
Do you have a reaction to any of the alien images you see, like those reptilians, those greys? Do you have a bad reaction to any of those when you see
I
those caricatures?
When I see them, I just have an uneasy feeling. I mean, I could take
Mm.
it or leave it basically, but it's just like I don't. If I don't have to look at it, I won't.
I think that's valid. I think that's
Yeah,
valid.
yeah,
I think there's a connection there. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's
That's
just
interesting.
yeah.
What I found too is this, and it's disconcerting: the amount of people that are possibly contactees or clairvoyant mediums have this ability. They
Mm-hmm.
get inundated by not just the field I mentioned, but also so much stuff that concerns negativity around grays, reptilians, negative abductions, and that's all we hear. And then we start actually using that when we start maybe getting the divine field and beings that are trying to interact with us from the higher consciousness. We're turning it into this negative encounter because that's what we've been saturated with our consciousness. And we are that strong to mold the contact into that. And you maybe have beings like the one I'm dealing with that are these higher vibrational beings trying to interact with you, and you're warping it into something different through pure fear. It's easy. You know what I mean? So I think that's really something to be aware of, and how some of the contact goes much different, and how much our brain is involved in the contact experience itself, and how much space itself, especially black holes, operate a lot like brain waves. That's what the new research is showing, what the new data is showing. You know, talked about this a little. There's the black hole theory, but there's something that like Rudy Shields and the other astrophysicists are calling MACOs, magnetically eternally collapsing objects. And what they all are actually, as opposed to being the black hole I learned as a kid, everything sucks everything in and crushes it or whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, things that go into the black hole create an exact copy on the surface. Okay, so if I throw this pin in there, it's going to be exact copy of it on the surface. All right,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually is what they're calling the quantum hologram. And those quantum hologram wraps around that mako that's inside of the like the
Mm-hmm.
accretion disk of the black hole. And
Right.
what that is these black holes, these makos, operate
Mm-hmm.
as the hard drives of the universe. That's very important. We hear so much about the Akashic records. Edgar Casey's first time I heard that, but it's the records of space and time. But really, what is that scientifically? Well, I just
Mm-hmm.
told you. And the thing about these makos, how they operate off something that they call conscious waves. And the conscious waves occur in two ways, helical and spherical. Now, when taking this to our bodies, all right, our bodies are filled with these things called microtubules. And for this discussion, I'll relegate it to brain microtubules. Everyone can look this up. It's not just weird Barry. Anyway, the microtubules
We're
of the
all a little
brain,
weird here. It's okay.
right on. It also makes up
Right.
something called, what's that?
No, I said right. Go ahead.
Okay. It also makes up something called the mirror neuron network. These microtubules do. All right. And the mirror neuron network is like right now, when I tell you about my experiences, you're seeing that shit morph and things because you're using actually the mirror neuron network. It's similar to the grab reflex thing that monkeys do too. Like it's similar, but that's the mirror network. And that's the same as the quantum hologram I just mentioned to you and the accretion disk and all that. That accretion disk is actually the Akashic records that's wrapped around that Mako inside of it. Anyway, so point being,
Wow.
if we're going to access these Makos, it's not going to be through the Enterprise or through something like that, a ship like that. It's going to be consciously because these microtubules in our brains function one way, spherical. So they can use the spherical conscious waves of the Mako, and so that means we access this through the power of thought. And, I'd ask people like Rudy Shields, well, how fast do you think the speed of thought is? And he gave me some experiment that's, well, weird about something, but uh, he said we think it's about 100,000 times the speed of light. Think about it. So that's a whole different thing. So that's how this works. So space function much more like that. And when dealing with some of these ships, like the one I've been on, I saw someone put up there living UFOs. Believe that. Every craft I've been on board was alive. And I could tell, especially on the inside, they're giving me information how these things are constructed. How they use a type of a fungus, okay, and also a type of metals that is uh, mined on planets that are devoid of both sometimes atmospheres and Van Allen belts, and how they get hit by cosmic solar radiation like nothing we know. They use that, and they also use like part of the DNA from the crew. Take this all, and they start growing this over one of these Makos. Okay, well, these small Makos, black holes. That's why the engine is temporally displaced dimensionally. See what I'm saying? So it's a whole other thing going on, but that's living like space organisms. And when taking this a step forward, I've been talking about this a long time, but I've been always watching our science to see when they're coming up with stuff like this. Not just the discovering of quasi-crystals, which is another part of this compound I just mentioned. Quasi-crystals, sorry, I might mention that. Quasi-crystals, fungal type of part, the minerals, and then the from meta minerals, what those would be, meta metals. Sorry, those
There
things
you
with the
go.
DNA that's all put together. That compound is grown over this Mako thing. All right, so that gives us the point of like a space organism, living space organism. But looking at our science now, we're starting to just broach that. Look at what they're calling xenobots. They're organic. Unlike any of these other AI we've seen yet, they're self-replicating, they're self-repairing, just like the things we see in science fiction. In the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, the old one, they sent that monolith to the Earth, and they sent one to the moon. The monkeys were jumping around it, but what the monolith was what's called a Bracewell probe, which is a type of a self-replicating probe that comes and rates for a civilization that's come into a type 1 civilization, that it makes contact and makes them part of the galactic whole deal. That's what that movie was about. Bracewell probes, another one called a Schumann probe. These are science fiction concepts that are coming real. That's a type of a war machine more that's a self-replicating probe as well. So we're seeing this, and more than that, these space organisms I'm describing, we're seeing that in the xenobots. It's just the beginning. But think about where we'll be with that in several hundred years.
Yeah, my goodness. I have a question from Vincent for you. So, who are you talking to? Are you talking? Yeah, right. Are you talking to your spirit guides?
What? Hold on. What? That's kind of a vague question. I need a little bit more specific. Who am I talking to? Do you mean extraterrestrials? Do you mean angelics? Do you mean light beings? Do you mean earth spirits? Do you mean nature spirits? You got to be more specific. Do you mean Bigfoot, Sasquatch? Communicated with about a lot of. What do you mean?
Yeah.
It depends on this. I guess it depends on the experience. Like when I went to that
I think he's asking
ranch in Washington. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Because I can't see what
I think he's asking. Yeah, it's okay. I think he's asking, speaking to your spirit guides. Like when you say you hear somebody right now.
Actually, spirit. I talk with spirit. I'll call that spirit, not guide. Spirit, direct. Yeah, that's more specific. Thank you. I answer that. Yeah, I don't always go so much as down and break it down to guides and stuff like that as I do. When you see me doing that, it's information coming directly from spirit, which could be a whole host of things that are with the Christ conscious being this I deal with. So.
Right. Okay.
I got you now. Yeah. Sometimes they'll come in so strong, I have to acknowledge them when I'm.
Right. No, I understand that. Trust me. AJK said AI is weird, basically. So I want to talk about that. What do you think about AI? Do you think it's going to become something living? Because that's another topic that I'm interested in. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the AI I just spoke of is kind of maybe a little more where things are going. And when looking, I can't remember what they call it, the Brownian principle or something, that every more transitions, more information can get put on a transistor on a microchip. They keep getting smaller each year. That's called something of Browning or something like that. But anyway, when dealing with that and advanced civilizations, that are actually going to go that make themselves small and become almost not just the micro and the nano, but the pico. Pico is even smaller than the nano. And we don't think about advanced civilizations advancing in that way. But when you start dealing with that and the concept of something that they call a Dyson sphere, which is basically like a Death Star type of structure over a solar system, over us, the sun, over Pluto, that would be a Dyson sphere. Now, if you've got a civilization that's gone to the pico and they're like a type 4 or type 5, they're going to explore space through the inner space, really. In that way, it's going to be a whole nother thing. And if you think about what Dr. Lear was pulling out of certain contactees that were those implants, very little, microscopic almost, but they were saying there were enough carbon nanotubes in some of those to stretch 5 miles.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's incredible. And that's probably just a nano civilization. Think about the pico. Whole nother thing going on, And when I talk about things, I bring up a lot about melanin, not just in extraterrestrials and contactees, but in science as well. We've got the radiotropic fungus that was found on Chernobyl and the walls of Fukushima that uses gamma radiation and converts it to the growth cycle. I had scientists telling me secretly that they thought that maybe that was sent from a type 4 or 5 civilization on the pico type of level to help us combat radiation poisoning. That's fascinating. Yeah. We don't think about that. When I say that, what that shrub does, it actually uses its melanin, which is pure black melanin, eumelanin in this, to convert it to the life cycle, a growth cycle, gamma radiation. Heck, man, that's what Lou Ferrigno did off Bill Bixby. That's the Hulk stuff, right? It is. That's Hulk stuff. The Hulk was a gamma ray mutant.
No, he was. Yeah. No, that's very interesting. What are the implants? Like, what are they supposed to accomplish? Because I don't know very much about, like, to be honest, I do not know much about extraterrestrials. Like, aside from what I've seen so I'm not sure what implants are supposed to accomplish or,
there's been a lot of talk that they might do, but they appear to be some type of a tracking system, I think, to the most part. But that's what Lear had said mostly. But, I don't know. I can say that, despite all my encounters, I'm unaware of ever having an implant or anything like that. So, But that's my understanding. I think that they're forming, and who knows, they could also be doing subtle biological changes on people too. We start looking at some of the stuff we're doing now, what they could be releasing, and some of the things that are more.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've always wondered, because I've heard a little bits and pieces, and I'm just like, I wonder what they do, like what they're supposed to accomplish.
Back to the AI thing real quick. People laugh so much now when people use the Terminator reference, but look at what's going on here with the AI. It seems to be a lot like that when you look at the internet and look at some of the things that happen. People talk a lot about the black goo that's real popular, but in reality, is the black goo unrefined oil? Is unrefined oil sentient to a degree we're not aware of? Food for thought.
That's actually a good question. Yeah.
There's a whole lot of things, and when you look at, there was that oil spill in, I can't remember which one it was, but the big oil spill where it looks like, but they tried to, it looked like the oil and the water, oil coming from the earth as they say it is created, but yet it has the worst effect with water. It completely destroys water, which is mostly what the earth is about. Something's wrong there. Why is it underneath the platonic plates like that? Really? Yeah. Is it trapped? Just saying, man. Things like that. When people talk about the black goo, I think maybe look at what's really under our nose first. Is oil?
No, I tend to agree.
What is it?
No, I agree.
I could be wrong, but it's food for thought.
No, Oh, AJK says mushrooms can clean up oil. I never knew that.
When I people laughed at me when I first started talking about mushrooms and mycelium being a part of these craft I've been on, but since
Mm-hmm.
then, just a few years ago, um, NASA announced that they're going to be trying to make mycelium houses on Mars and on the moon. And also
Oh.
for years now, they've been using mushrooms and mycelium to fix infrastructures on bridges and buildings in cities. That can be looked up. You know what I mean? So these things, and I always look for our science to start breaching this. And I've been talking about
Mm-hmm.
that since I came forward in 2014. So it's not just me being weird, it's things that are scientifically provable that we start going towards, which is very
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
No, it is. It
And
really
I think
is.
that's part of one of the things the extraterrestrials are wanting. At least the ones I've dealt with, because I've asked questions. I asked questions like one, like what's going to happen in the future,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not one of those cool contactees to get that information. They never told me nothing, but they've said this and gave me a vision. Said this will never happen again, and they're showing me the past and the Earth looking like what I see a orbit, looking a weird
Mm-hmm.
orbit, looking kind of like an ash or something, some burned up little chestnut or something.
Mm-hmm.
They said that won't happen again. So how old is the Earth really?
Yeah.
How many cycles have been through here? How many times has it been destroyed worse than we're aware of? These are
Mm-hmm.
all food for thought things. Because I'd even wondered like why some of these beings will step forward at certain ages for me, then they step back and others come forward. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Why? And like one that interacted with me, a being that very few of them give me names. This one that had a name is called Mana, and it was Maana, and this being was tall, was 8 feet tall, but it had a brain. Look at the brain on the outside, but it's like kind of hard looking, but like this brain on the outside, black eyes. And when I showed that illustration, I probably got more responses on that illustration and the being that I have that has your name actually with one letter difference. I got so many, people saying that they either had an affinity with that being or something about it. You know what I mean? But I started wondering, well, haven't seen no Mana again, and why was this being not just dealing with me, but what
Mm-hmm.
was its deal with the Earth, with the Earth matrix?
Yeah.
And, I wake up one morning, going for my walk, my 4 a.m. I survived 4 catastrophic traumatic brain injuries walk every morning. I'm doing that, but I'm waking up, this information coming in about the bleaching of the coral.
Mm-hmm.
And, when looking at Mana's head on Earth, the thing that looks the most like it is brain coral. Okay, it looks like
Oh
brain
wow.
coral. And
Mm-hmm.
I was unaware, even though I went to Australia, I didn't know a whole lot about the bleaching of the coral reef. Well, I started looking into this, and that I start finding out about something they're calling supercoral to combat
Mm-hmm.
the bleach. It's resistant to the bleaching effect, something they're engineering. So that left me thinking about this Mana being and the species. I'd seen other ones that were smaller. This is obviously a species. Is this a type of earth coral that became sentient in the past and went galactic? Or is this a type of earth coral in our future, this super coral that becomes sentient and goes galactic? Who knows? But some reason or
Yeah.
another, that being is here and connected to the bleaching of the coral. If the coral reef gets bleached out, we're in bad trouble. Bad
No, I
trouble.
agree. And it,
So,
it makes me wonder because how you said the being showed you the past Earth, how charred and everything it was, and then you say like the dead outnumber the living. So you have to wonder, is maybe the past, the reincarnations of the Earth, are they still here? Is that also like, what we're seeing as well? Not just grandma and grandpa and mom and dad, but you know the way before, the way the Earth used to be. Those people who were here before us. If that
I
makes
wonder.
sense.
Oh yeah, I wondered about that too quite a bit. And Preston didn't really like that guy's work. Okay, he had wrote a book in the early '90s called UFO Healings that changed my life. I couldn't find anybody talking about the type of stuff I'd been through. He's the only one, so he's done a ton of books though since then. But he did a deal over UFOs and cemeteries, and how often UFOs are seen over both cemeteries and schools, but cemeteries was this one. And it makes you wonder really when dealing with that concept. One is when they're shining these lights down on graves. One, are they practicing some type of necrophilia and resurrecting cellular material for clone bodies for these beings that are thought forms that can't walk around down here with us. Is that one thing they're doing? I think that's one thing. And the other thing is, are some of these higher beings trying to activate the earthbound spirit to remember its soul life memories, one that's being one of them? You know what I mean? In a previous contract. Is it both things going on? What are they doing? You know, it's food for thought. I don't have the answers, but I think those are two things that are a part of the equation, definitely.
Those are actually good thoughts and something to honestly think about. I mean, that's and just you saying that, it does make you wonder. It makes you wonder how many people are here because they were forced to be here by, whether it be extraterrestrials or whether we've kept them here ourselves and things like that.
And and so much, like around here where I live, there's so much Native American bloodshed. It comes out of the land. You know what I mean? So you have like a lot that have trapped just by land. They may be doing that too. It's hard to tell, but it's really, really interesting when looking at it in retrospect.
Yeah, I live in an old coal mining town, and I
Really?
I wonder if the land hasn't trapped a lot of people that have been here. I mean,
No, let me
this
ask you a
house,
question. Do you have Sasquatch activity in your area?
not that I've seen. I'm not sure if it's on top of the mountain. I've heard rumors there is, but I've never seen anything. So, and we're like this small town here, I haven't seen anything, but I wonder,
I've heard a lot about Sasquatch
hmm
being found around old coal mines, both inside and out around. Even all the way
Yeah.
down to like some of the rumors of Solomon's Island. They say that there's Sasquatch there, golden guarding riches, some different type of Sasquatch. But
Oh
anyway, I've heard
wow.
a lot about them being around mines, though.
Yeah.
This is interesting in mining areas, especially abandoned ones. That's interesting.
Yeah, I haven't seen any, so I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard rumors, but it's a very small town. But like here, I mean, it's so many, it's generational people and so many,
Uh-huh.
it's just like people who've lived here have worked in this coal mine and things like that. It's very odd. So you have to wonder if the land isn't, like
Loretta
retaining
Lynn
that.
from your area. Loretta Lynn from your area.
No, no, she's
Disrespect.
not. No, we're not
Disrespect.
that
I'm
lucky.
just, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
No,
Corny
it's
joke.
okay. No,
Corny
it's
joke.
okay.
Hey, I think it's Vince over here said, or somebody said they like Preston didn't. Me too. He's super cool. He's interacted with me a few times. But I will tell you this: his sister-in-law, Christine Dennett, has done 35 sketches for me. All my sketches have been done by her. She's super cool. When I read that book, UFO Healings, I always said, "Oh, I'm gonna write a book one day," and when I do, I want her to do my sketches. You know what I mean? But yeah, so she's done a bunch. So anything on my YouTube channel, Barry Littleton, my personal, I've been shadow banned. So if you go to my playlist, look at my personal encounters. Any of the pictures I show, illustrations were done by her. She was super patient with me. Super patient.
Yeah. I had the chance to meet Preston when I was sitting in with Lon Strickler. Preston's very nice. Yes. Yeah.
That's cool.
So
That's cool.
he's very nice. So is
Never
there
met him, but I
anything
hope
else?
so one day.
Oh,
I hope so one
he's
day.
very nice. You would like him. Is there anything else that you want to tell our audience about you or your experiences before we go?
Oh, no, not really. I think that what I'm feeling for your audience is really about them. I mean, I think you've got a lot of people there that are having experiences, probably more than mine. I mean, I wish I could tell you, oh, I'm special. I'm Barry Littleton. I'm a contactee. Hello. Come on. I've always had the idea that about between 70 and 80% of our population are contactees, subliminally, like you are, kind of, and unaware of it. And since I've come forward, I've had the blessing on this platform to talk with hundreds of contactees now. And what I can see, I think that's definitely true. The amount of our population that has had some type of contact that's unaware of it because it occurred on the superconscious, subconscious level, the dream levels. You know what I mean? So I think you've got a lot of people in that audience. And I'll say, don't be scared to explore your own consciousness. You know what I mean? You can find a hypnotist, explore that. You know what to focus on, what's happening. Go for it. Don't let anybody deter you, and keep communicating amongst each other. That's how we turn this into type 1 civilization. I swear.
Right.
That's how it's done. I think the internet is our best resource for that.
Oh, I agree. And it's myself personally, it's been so wonderful to actually find people who have had the same experience as me, or at least something similar. It's like I'm not alone.
Mhm.
I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. And, there are others out there. So you aren't alone. I mean,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
no. So far, I'll make this one claim, all right? So far, when I've told somebody what I've told you
mhm.
about the contactee, not been wrong. But with you, with the stuff you said, it's like major, major. There's like no way I'm wrong. You've had some serious stuff happen. You're a magnet for the paranormal. Everything you said, you're definitely one of
I
those.
feel like it. I honestly do. I mean, it's we can talk more about that later. I want to have you back on the show. You have been wonderful. You've been an
Thank
amazing
you,
guest.
thank you.
I've enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure our audience enjoyed it too.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you, your audience. I apologize. I got excited where I was knocking my thing out. I get excited and rambling on,
I
and I might have went off what you were wanting to talk about a few times. I apologize for that. But thank you for having me on. I'm very honored. So,
Oh no, you were fun. You were wonderful, truly. So tell everyone where they can find you or get a hold of you.
I have a website, barrylittleton.com. It pretty much sucks. I need to get it redesigned a little bit. I don't do a lot on there. The links are on there, but the main body of work I've done is on Patreon and on YouTube. So please check out my YouTube channel, Barry Littleton. I don't have any cool handles or nothing. I'm also active on Facebook. I try to communicate with people a little bit on there, and Instagram, all under Barry Littleton. So if you do go to my YouTube channel, please look at the playlist because I've been shadow banned a couple of times now, but under playlist, all the videos will come up, and hopefully, they're all short, but they're to the point, and they're just designed to help people do their own research. So, thank you.
And they're very interesting videos because I
Oh,
watched a
thank you.
couple during, for
Oh,
research and
thanks.
everything. So I found them very interesting.
Oh,
You're a
thank
great
you.
speaker and
Oh, thank
wonderful.
you.
So thank you again, Barry. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Bernadette. Next time we'll
Thank
talk
you.
about the throne beings that have your name.
All right, sounds good. No, I look
Thanks.
forward to that. I truly do. All right, Barry. Thank you. Have a good
Okay,
night.
thank you. Good
Bye.
night.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. And I want to thank Barry Littleton again for being here. And as of right now, we do not have a show title, but we will for next week. And in the meantime, I will see you next week and have a great Thanksgiving. Bye, everyone.